Oh, we're live, by the way. I'm trying to remember how the last podcast opened. ITSM Weekly, ITSM News, information.
The world of ITSM, sports, news.
Chris was so good at that. Welcome to Hacking Business Technology.
The music was good too.
The music was good.
Mood music.
Bum, 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 bum.
Yeah, we gotta theme this podcast.
Bum, 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 bum. Yeah.
Get your wife to do a voiceover again.
Yeah, and actually there are two versions of the intro from the last podcast. One was my neighbor's daughter, because my wife wasn't home and we just needed to throw it together. And then later we changed it to my wife. So I'm your host, Matt Barron. We've got Farah and Matt Hooper. Depending on whether YouTube wants to put it on this side or this side, they're over here.
I know, right? Nothing like consistency.
They should be up here. That feels better, like the Brady's. No? Okay, so I totally hijacked this episode, as I always do, because why not? I wanted to talk about a tweet that I saw where someone said specifically, and I already shared it in the show notes, but they said, and I quote, "Innovation is overvalued. Maintenance often matters more." And then he goes on to say that he would further call it sustenance instead of maintenance, which is beautiful. Right? If you think about maintenance, it's a bad term because you're not necessarily maintaining it, or you are maintaining it to a level of sustenance. But maintaining could actually mean changing it, too.
Right.
I think there's sort of like a je ne sais quoi that goes along with maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I agree. I think the more that you sustain or maintain your core, the more room for you create for your resources to be able to focus on innovation, right, and doing new things. But if you're always focusing on innovating but everything doesn't work, well, then that's still of no value.
And what's bad about this statement also is that it's polarizing. It makes it look like it's one or the other, and it really isn't. There are other aspects at play. If we had, oh, dude, we should come up with this, an IT tarot deck. You pull it out, and it's like, how bad is your maintenance? Good, bad. You pull out the maintenance guide. And what's funny about tarot decks is that they don't actually tell you anything about your future or whatever. They're just aspects of life. So these would be aspects of IT, like innovation, maintenance, sustenance. And then there's this other thing in there in between those two that I really like, and that's execution. And I think innovation plus execution is where we're headed. Right? Isn't that how business change occurs?
I think I saw this great presentation about 4 years back from a guy from PwC who he was talking about sustainable innovation. And one of the things he was saying is you know, even people doing email or taking phone calls, you know, that's innovative, but it's just become sustainable. Meaning it's become commoditized, and it allows us now to the next level, right? And so innovation's great, but if it's innovation with such an impairment or so much fragility, then it's just frustrating, right?
Yeah, or even if you just have a lot of ideas and don't feel like they're getting heard. Yeah, it's about scaling that sort of thing to be able to say, you know, here's the level, here are all the ideas that we have. Here are all the possible directions we could take from where we are today. And being able to say, look, like these 1,000 things over here, they don't matter. And these other 1,000 over here, they really don't matter. It's these like 100 things that would really make a difference.
Our sales engineers had a great expression. They say, because you know we've been on this at Lindas this big innovation kick, right? And trying to bolster our Magic Quadrant position as a visionary. But the SEs came back and said, listen, you know, this is, yes, it's doable, but is it consumable? And they're pushing back, saying, you know, we love that we have innovative things that we can show that no one else does. But it's not, you know, it's not necessarily consumable by a lot of our customers. They're not there yet, right? It's cool, but it's not something they can readily digest.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge for a lot of the product companies, right? Because sometimes you're out innovating the demand of your customer base, and how do you strike that balance? Because you want to be leading edge, you want that ability to be recognized as a visionary or innovator, but at the same time, there's that challenge of, okay, well, are my customers ready? Are they going to buy in? They're still struggling with the basics. But I think on the flip side of that, within a typical corporation, let's say they're not a product company, but even within its own operations, I feel like if I look at why companies are slower in innovating or transforming or slicing that 10 ideas that you just mentioned about, Matt, I feel like so many boring IT initiatives are still completely focused only on operational excellence, and I feel like that impedes them from being able to grow. Like, I don't think you have to fix everything and be so streamlined and then focus. You kind of have to have a balance of both to say, can I achieve a sustainable level of operational, quote unquote excellence? It doesn't necessarily mean I'm perfect everywhere, but still foster a culture that wants to grow and focus on the next 10 ideas that could make them take a bit.
But even in operational excellence, you can still have, like, I was just watching this a puppet conference speaker. I want to say his name was Jason Wong. He was at Netflix. He's now at Twilio. But he was the chaos engineer, or one of the chaos engineers at Netflix. And he was talking about chaos theory and how it builds resilience. And it was interesting, and he was talking about the progression into Chaos Monkey, which we know is one of these software programs at Netflix that just goes and shuts down servers that are in clusters. That they also went on to then innovate into Latency Monkey, because sometimes things weren't down, but things got slow. And how did you deal with the end user experience? And he used Twitter as an example. Like, when you search Twitter, sometimes you'll get the rich media, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you'll get just tweets, but sometimes you'll get even more. And it just really depends on how fast the server's responding, and it has a kind of this failback mode to keep you getting something in front of you, though it'll give you more if it can, but if it can't, it gets you at least something, right? It's kind of this resilience strategy. And then they talked about Chaos Kong, which is like taking whole regions of your cloud infrastructure out. Like, what's the impact of it? And if you're not readily testing this stuff, and it was really interesting, he had some innovative ideas that were just basic blocking and tackling around single point of failure. But his approach was very interesting, So I think you can still have innovation in your day-to-day activities.
What it sounds like is we're talking about innovation, and I think it's omnifaceted. There are infinite amounts of ways that we can innovate. So Farah brought it up, and she said, if you're a product company, you're sometimes out innovating the customers. I think Magic Quadrant is a great place to look for that, right? It's the people that are innovative that are leaving Fortune 500 companies behind because they just can't change fast enough, or they just can't get with it fast enough. The value of it can't be realized, and some of those customers are looking for innovation in other directions, whether it's deliver it, or how you support it, or the licensing of it, or shedding. What do I want to say? Shedding archetypes of yesteryear. Things that are really difficult. Like, here's a great example: Oracle licensing. It is so complex that you may have a better time switching to a different platform than understanding if you're paying the right amount for your current platform.
Yeah. It's true.
I mean, that's a great example where your innovation direction isn't necessarily what products or features or functionalities or value the software provides, but rather something else about the system. I feel like we should have like a soundboard system. Cha-ching!
Well, the thing with complex systems is now that we're layering these complex systems, right? So you might have a complex system with all these JSON APIs and tight integration and decoupling your what you talked about last week, Baron, about decoupling your user interface from your business logic, which helps to allow you to tweak things and dial things in without major impacts. But it also does, the thing with complex systems is that if you're running that in the cloud, Now, Amazon itself has complex systems. You know, it's got a bunch of dynamic DNS. It's got elastic load balancers. Everything there is complex as well too. So now it becomes this, you know, fragile system if you don't carefully control state.
Right. Scale should match scale.
Yes.
Right? The more value, the more scale your system may have. The more value, the more you may need to hire. When you add complexity, you should be adding complexity equally. It's sort of like I saw an absolutely fantastic presentation on testing automation recently, and the guy talks about, hey, listen, when you write a line of code, you're not only writing a line of code, you are writing a line of code and 5 to 10 test scripts for that line of code. And it's sort of like, it's understanding that if you add complexity to your ERP system, your any HR system, any system, you need to consider the actual impact of that. You may need to hire people. Oh my gosh! But guess what? If you pick
responsible coding.
If you pick a good platform, your implementation will cost less. It'll be easier. People can just adopt it. You could hire any systems thinker off the streets and go live. Welcome to 2016.
Yeah, I wonder too. Just, you know, there's a big gap in skills though from enterprises, and you know, for us probably closer to this than I am today. But enterprises are probably thinking they're still probably taking the same approach to infrastructure as in the cloud and in, you know, the virtual space with Docker and microservices that they took with monolithic systems, and you can't.
No.
But I think that's where the creative skills or there's an additional set of skills that takes to think out that far. Like if we think of what Matt just laid out, right? And I look at a lot of the product companies right now. You've got your Silicon Valley folks, but let's take them out of the mix. A lot of development is now offshored. And when you think of the skills, offshore is very much of I will do A plus B to equal C, right? Very linear thinking. So now if I talk about how I'm going to transform those teams, I think that's where the value comes, where your onshore folks can bring that skill set to say, let's think through what this one line of code actually has an impact towards, and that's the new relationship in terms of what you can work with your offshore team, right? But I don't think that happens today, and I don't think that people are either thinking that far ahead nor have the skill set to be able to do so. So how do you invent that or bring that in? Sure.
Yeah, or they're not incentivized to do so. I think that kind of comes down to contract management. It'd be beautiful to see some better contracts between huge vendors, especially when it comes to app dev, custom app dev. It kills me to hear the term onshore, offshore, only because there's so many people that are on no shore, right? Whatever, geography, schmeography. But I'm saying, like, yes, I think, yeah, if your contract says you must deliver this, people feel constricted to that. But, man, I love those case studies where they break the mold. You know, when you hear the story of some app dev guy really coming up with something awesome, and he wasn't ever really, like, that wasn't his job, he's just shiny. And then guess what? He's so good, he's not going to be under contract for more than 10 seconds. Right.
Well, what's the I think his name is John Allspot from Etsy. Talked about the team of pizzas, something like that. You shouldn't have a team bigger than you can feed a pizza with.
2 pizzas.
Yeah, to keep it close and iterative, and you know, I just constantly juxtapose that kind of mentality against traditional ITSM thinking. You know, where we are. It's all about requirements and understanding what the service level agreements are and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, it's a fallacy to think that the business had the requirements right.
Yeah, they never really do. Yeah, I completely agree. But that's why I love Scrum teams, right? One of the things that I feel like if you do Scrum well is and I really try and push this, is that my role is not just a developer, and my role is just not a tester. You have to be willing to put on the different hats, because that's when you can take advantage of everyone's different skill set. right, to come back with a better product. As if you also, in many ways, especially from a consultant perspective, I'm not just a track lead that's going to go and implement the next version of Incident. I'm playing a product owner role because I'm helping my customer build better requirements that think a little bit, further. And I might also then be a scrum master, and then I also may be a tester thinking through the next test script. And you have to be that chameleon, I feel.
You can hire Farah at KPMG by going to kpmg.com/Farah. And that is how you will get only her. Wouldn't that be nice? It would be really nice to say, listen, clearly, Farah, you know what you're talking about. That is awesome. I love that you have that attitude and that you do that. Some of the biggest projects I've been on have been 2- and 3-person teams where they all had that mentality.
Yeah.
Seeing that stuff come to life in a huge organization, it just melts me when it works out. It melts me.
And we had these teams. Early in my career, I was part of a marketing and sales group called ECAT, Electronic Commerce Action Team, and it literally was a 6- or 7-person group of us building out a web farm and high scalable internet commerce services. And we just couldn't deal with the corporate bureaucracy. We had to move fast. It was 1995, and internet was coming. And
you needed to build products. You needed a product now.
Yeah, but it really was business IT or shadow IT then. But we look at it now, and we're going right back to that mentality. Because I think that's what happens is when you get too much into these larger corporate-esque groups of functions and roles, that the innovation does stifle, even if it's operationally sound. You're not improving. And CSI really is nothing but a fancy word for innovation, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, I agree.
I also like to think of it like the water line on a harbor or a levee or a dam or whatever. Actually, dam, because that specifically sounds like a cuss word. But if you think about that water level, all of the water needs to go up to move that line up. If all of the water doesn't move up, it's going to be imbalanced. It's not going to actually move the line up. It'll just be a little wave on there, like nothing will even move. You need to move progressively forward so that everything changes at once. The culture can adjust to this new way of thinking. All of your systems, downstream impacts, upstream impacts, they need to be able to catch up.
Yeah, it was really an epiphany for me, and probably one of the best books I think I'll ever have read was Eric Ries's Lean Startup. Because, rethinking your approach to what you know and what you don't know, and what's working and what's not working, this whole kind of pivot and learn mentality, it applies to everything. It applies to business models as well as technology, innovation, and creation. It also applies significantly to operations. We in operation we constantly focus on what's working and not testing what's not working, right? And that's the mistake. And that's all of a sudden we get blindsided by some cloud infrastructure or by some business shadow IT application that gets dropped on us because we completely disengaged. We weren't thinking about business.
But you zoned in on something that's so important, which is the concept of a retrospective, right? Constantly evaluating what's working, what's not working. And again, I think that's another thing that people struggle with immensely. They think it's so, I still have memories, and Mark could probably attest to this, of dragging people into a retrospective at the end of a sprint cycle, as an example. And they would roll their eyes and be like, yeah, we did great. And it's just so hard to get people to truly take that activity seriously and constructively because it can be so valuable. And for those of you watching the show, I used to use retrospectivecookies.com. You can order freaking fortune cookies that have you open up your fortune and it asks a retrospective question. But yeah, anyways, it's like Adam Weisbart. I can't really pronounce his last name, so I probably just butchered it. But again, I think retrospectives need to be taken so seriously because that is what really, to me, is what can help an organization truly move that inch forward, right? By evaluating what's working well and what's not, and coming up with ideas to improve.
That is just awesome. Put on the hats, rethink what you know, take retroactive seriously, and I think assignment versus alignment of teams, right? You are going to do this on this team. No, I'm not. You guys start something, I'll believe in it, and then we'll go forward, right? Isn't there something different about a team that acts that way versus saying you have to do this thing?
100%.
100%.
So that's an interesting one. We got to talk about that more. That's how you hack business technology. We'll see you next week. Peace.
Boom.
Bye, everybody.